Spoilers ahead for 1899. The opening narration of 1899 quotes an Emily Dickinson poem. The brain is wider than the sky, for put them side by side, the one the other will contain. In retrospect, this testament to the depth and power of human imagination telegraphed the first season's final reveal. Mora and the other passengers of the Kerberos are in a simulation. They are not in the year 1899 or on a ship at sea. In what we're led to believe is reality, they are in the year 2099 on a ship in space. Why? The reveal comes late in the game, so we don't have a lot to go on, but the computer terminal on the ship labels Project Prometheus a survival mission. Classic sci-fi tells us, anytime you have over 1,000 people hurtling through space while kept entertained in a simulation, it's because they are looking for a new home. Usually because Earth has become uninhabitable due to environmental issues, nuclear war, or any other number of cataclysmic circumstances. The phrase survival mission lines up with that hypothesis. They have a long journey to their new home, so in the meantime, they're kept in stasis in a simulation. But why this simulation? An 8-day loop where they get lost at sea chasing a missing ship, all while running from dark pasts, tortured by traumatic memories. You can imagine a scenario where a similar setup leads to something more pleasant. On a ship with the exciting prospect of a fresh start in new lands. Maybe it's 1899 because it's a nostalgic time, with some technology, enough to provide comfort, but not so much that it ruins everything. It also works nicely because it's a nice, even 200 years before the quote-unquote real date. And of course we have to put real in quotes, because you never know if Season 2 will reveal the spaceship is another simulation, just one layer closer to reality. But something in the simulation went wrong, trapping everyone in this 8-day loop. And clearly, Mora's father Henry blames her for it. He tells her son Elliot they are trapped, so your mother can keep you alive. We see a flashback to Mora injecting her son with the same stuff she gets every time she forgets, and the simulation starts over. We hear Daniel telling her, you can't stop him from dying. And in the present, Daniel tells Mora that she made herself forget having a son to get rid of the pain. All of this implies that Mora and Daniel's son Elliot is dead. It implies that she tried to keep him alive in the simulation, but that eventually failed, and instead, she tried to forget he even existed. In one of the final scenes, we see the first simulation that Mora and Daniel made together, a playroom which can be found under a grave, which I assume is Elliot's. Maybe while Elliot was still alive, they created this small place as an escape. Then, when they realized their son was dying, Mora couldn't let go, and tried to keep Elliot's mind permanently alive inside it. Or maybe that's why the playroom was created to begin with. That's where Elliot's consciousness was kept alive. But Henry tells us, our brain is a very complicated construct. As much as we can try to forget the things we don't want to remember, we will never be able to delete them entirely. They're part of who we are, woven into our very fabric. Maybe no matter how hard Mora tried to make Elliot forget he was dead, the memory creeped back. He would begin to recall the traumatic experience of falling ill and her desperate attempt to save his mind. So she would make him forget again. Maybe it takes about 8 days to remember. Hence the 8-day loop. That's how often things need to be reset in order for traumatic memories to remain buried. Or maybe she's the one who couldn't forget. Perhaps being with a construct of Elliot was a painful reminder of his death in reality, so she tried to erase the memory of him. But as we've said, memories cannot be erased entirely. They have a way of creeping back. She forgot her son, but a semblance of that memory returns. She recalls a miscarriage, and maybe if the loop were allowed to extend beyond 8 days, she would remember Elliot and her loss entirely. While explaining everything, Henry tells Elliot they came on this trip because they made the choice to forget their past, and now they're all stuck in here as well. This implies people had a choice of whether or not to enter the simulation, or maybe they were already in the simulation, but had a choice of whether or not to remember the outside world. We have no idea how dire things really are. For all we know, the passengers on the spaceship Prometheus are all that's left of humanity. If true, probably everyone on there has lost loved ones, or at minimum, suffer the pain of knowing the human race is on its last legs. So maybe Mora offered them the option to join her in forgetting their traumas. But maybe she wasn't entirely forthcoming about what that would entail, or she didn't realize it herself. They didn't know they were signing up for an endless loop, constantly running away from their past and never reaching a destination. She didn't realize how resilient their memories would be. Even if consciously forgotten, terrible memories would manifest in other ways and continue torturing everyone aboard the Prometheus and the Kerberos. Many of their memories appear to take place in the 1800s, which fits the setting of the simulation. Perhaps, like a game of telephone, their traumas are reinterpreted to fit their new reality. Take Ling Yi, for example. Her story is that she tried putting someone to sleep so she could take her place on the Kerberos, but she gave the girl too much of the drug and inadvertently killed her. Maybe something just like that occurred in reality. Given the circumstances, it's easy to imagine how. Maybe as Earth fell, there was only so much room on the ship or ships. Not everyone could leave, and some had to be left behind to die. Did Ling Yi steal someone's place on the spaceship leaving Earth? And the guilt was too much, so she signed up to have her memory of it erased? Like with Mora, the memory is erased, but some version of it returns. Our memories are woven into our very fabric. As Jerome says about the birds in episode 2, even the birds up there have their own prison. They can't escape who they are, and neither can we. But perhaps there is one way to escape trauma. If you can't forget the thing that makes you feel guilt or grief, maybe you just need to stop feeling entirely. Or at least, don't let feelings drive your actions. That seems to be Henry's approach. Observing everyone in the simulation, he says, every time they make the same mistakes, and every time they die, because they can't get rid of their emotions. But that's what makes them weak. It's human nature's ultimate flaw. One shouldn't base a choice on love, anger, hate. They're just silly feelings that cloud the mind. Where is Henry, by the way? He seems to have escaped Mora's loop, or avoided joining it to begin with, by hiding in a previous simulation. Remember the flashback to Mora and Daniel in bed? Later, when Mora returns to that location, the screen first cuts to an external shot of the pyramid, implying that's where the loft is located. And when Henry steps outside, that pyramid, or a similar one, is in the background. So my interpretation is that the pyramid is a physical representation of a simulation. If you step outside of a particular simulation construct, you'll see the pyramid. Or perhaps the pyramid is specifically where prior iterations are stored. There was a simulation where Mora and Daniel lived together. Now, with everyone in the ship construct, the previous versions are stored in the pyramid. But Henry stays outside of it. Though notice all the strange protrusions around him, which look similar to those that appeared on the Kerberos before it's deleted. Maybe this outside world where Henry lives was similarly infected and abandoned. But he remains there, outside the pyramids, outside the simulated instances, and importantly, outside Mora's loop. But he is still trapped. He is still inside the simulation itself. So how do you get out? Well, it seems the simulation was programmed with some interfaces, which allow it to be controlled from the inside. Daniel's device lets him create fog and kill people on command, though they're not really dead. As Henry says, everyone on this ship will eventually die and take part in the next simulation. So dying just means ending your time in this particular instance. We also see a small interface hidden in a drawer, and Daniel manages to reprogram things by plugging into an in-simulation manifestation of the mainframe. There's also the bugs. Based on a memory of Mora telling Elliot to let the bug go, bugs were reprogrammed as basically a cheat code, a way to open doors. But how do you leave the simulation entirely and wake up? It seems they only programmed one way. inserting a particular key into a particular pyramid. But Mora never wanted to wake up, so she did the equivalent of throwing the key away. She made herself forget the key even existed. Now, no one can leave. Daniel and Elliot, however, realize that Mora and everyone else are trapped in this endless loop, so they've been trying to make her remember. Elliot hands her the pyramid, hoping she'll realize what it is and present the key so she can wake up. Why do they remember when Mora doesn't? In part, it might be because they're dead. They are no more than programming inside the simulation, so they aren't subject to all the same memory wipes as living people. To some extent, we know Elliot was, because he didn't remember that he's dead, but maybe it did allow them to escape the loop and exist outside of it. The triangle symbol is the company's logo. If you see it on something, it would imply it's a construction of theirs, like a stamp of ownership. Elliot has it tattooed on his neck. Perhaps because he isn't a biological human anymore. He's consciousness that's been saved inside the simulation. And maybe that tattoo's been programmed as a way of essentially identifying NPCs. I suspect Daniel is the same, mainly because of this moment. When Mora asks, "Will you be there when I wake up?" he solemnly answers, "Always. I'll always be there." Which sounds a lot like the sort of thing characters say before they die. "I'll always be with you." They're speaking metaphorically. By the way, why was it so urgent for Mora to wake up? It seems like they've tried to wake her up many times before, but there's a sense that this is their last chance. In episode 7, Daniel tells her, "You have to wake up, or there will be nothing left to wake up for, and your consciousness will be trapped in here forever." That statement makes it sound like if she doesn't wake up now, then any hope on the outside world will be gone, and there will be nothing left but to stay inside the simulation forever. If they're hurtling through space, I can think of plenty of reasons there would be urgency. For example, maybe they're approaching a planet with the potential to become their new home, but if no one is awake to land the ship, they'll pass by it, use up their remaining fuel, and end up floating indefinitely. And as long as their life support systems last, they'll just be trapped in the sim. That's obviously total speculation, but I don't think the show has told us enough yet to have a reasonable idea. So that's just an example of the sort of thing that could explain it. So where does Mora's brother Kieran fit into all this? Based on what Daniel says in the last episode, it would seem he's largely responsible for keeping Mora in the loop. Daniel says, "Your brother. He took over the whole program whilst you were in here. He's been controlling everything, and I've tried so hard to get you out of here, multiple times." Mora interjects that she thought her father was controlling everything, but Daniel corrects her. "He's just as stuck here as everyone else. I don't know how fast your brother is going to figure out what I've done, but you have to leave now. This is so much bigger than you think. You have to wake up. You have to stop him, or everything will be lost." This seems in direct contradiction to something we learn in episode 7. Mora had the key to leave the entire time. It was with the envelope she received, supposedly from her brother. So if her brother wanted her trapped in the simulation, why would he send her the key to escape? It doesn't add up. And I think we'll learn that the key didn't come from him. When Daniel's surprised she had the key this entire time, she says, "It's not mine. I got it with the envelope. Someone sent it to me. I think it was my brother." The envelope may have come from him, but she's not certain the key did. And if you think back to what was in the letter, it seems designed to make her paranoid. It implies that her father was up to something on the Prometheus, and it tells her to trust no one. If her brother wants to keep her trapped in the sim, then creating that distrust is a good way to do it. Her father actually knows what's going on. He knows that she's stuck in a loop. So if Kieran wants her trapped, it'd be a good idea to make sure she doesn't believe her father. And if she's being paranoid, then a strange man showing up, claiming to be her husband, is unlikely to be believed. So that letter actually created a hurdle to her escape by making her less likely to believe those around her who know at least part of the truth. So who did the key come from? I'm guessing it came from Mora herself. Just as she supposedly created the simulation but doesn't remember, she may have also programmed it so she always has the key. Subconsciously, she may even be fighting for her and everyone else to wake up. Every episode begins with a character reliving a traumatic memory. Then they hear someone say, "Wake up," and they're brought back to the present. In the first episode, it's Mora's father who says it, to her. But in episode 2 and beyond, it's always Mora who says, "Wake up." You can either recognize her voice or turn on closed captions, which tells you it's Mora. That would seem in direct contradiction to what Henry would have you believe. He claims that Mora is keeping them all trapped. So why is she telling everyone to wake up? The way Daniel talks, he makes it sound like Kieran is really the one in charge, and Henry is just a pawn. He's just as trapped as the rest of them. So I don't think we can take Henry at his word. I'm guessing the right answer of who is at fault will be complicated. Maybe Mora made some mistakes, and those mistakes are part of what trapped everyone in the simulated loop. But maybe Kieran is also manipulating events and taking advantage of her mistakes. Maybe she realized what was going on and would have freed herself along with everyone else, but Kieran stopped her. Why? I assume it'll come down to control, especially when you pay attention to some of the show's themes. One of the first things we see is a book on Mora's desk, The Awakening by Kate Chopin. Partly about the oppressive roles for women in Victorian society. Also worth mentioning, the name of the book is so appropriate. The show also explicitly discusses this oppression and how Mora has struggled against it in her career. Henry blames emotions for getting everyone killed, and even Daniel blamed emotions for getting Mora trapped, saying how she hoped to avoid the pain of losing their son. And the doctor on the ship scoffed at Mora's medical opinion, saying, "That's why I think it's a mistake for women to venture into medicine. They're too attached to their emotions to clearly perceive the facts at hand." So we are seeing a couple of philosophies at play. Henry seems to think emotions have zero place in decision-making. And there's the claim that Mora made an emotional decision, which has gotten everyone trapped in the loop. I have a feeling that if we get to know Kieran, he'll be a lot like that sexist doctor. He'll make the claim that Mora is too emotional to be in charge. He should be in charge, maybe along with their father Henry. And if he's in charge, maybe he has malicious intent. Maybe he'll let the Prometheus float aimlessly in space while he sits safely on another ship. A ship called the Kerberos. Hey, we have no way of knowing if the ship we saw at the end of the season is the only spaceship out there. But we're really getting into speculation territory now, so probably time to start wrapping up. Like I said before, Henry claims that a lot of what went wrong is Mora's fault. But by the end of the series, I think we'll see that's not entirely true. I think we'll see there's a middle ground where emotions or traumatic events should not be entirely shut out. I predict that part of the show's message will be about accepting your past traumas and accepting your emotions. It may be difficult and it may be painful, but rejecting them is even worse. That's how you get trapped in dangerous, self-destructive cycles of behavior, never learning from your mistakes. I think we can wrap it up there. 1899 gave us a lot of revelations in the first season, but clearly is still holding a lot back. Daniel even makes the comment, "This is so much bigger than you think." And to some extent, I think he's talking to us. The creators of the show have 3 seasons planned, so hopefully we hear about an official renewal soon, and it can start the countdown to more answers. And let's be honest, probably a lot more questions too. And I know a lot of this video is speculation, but I think we're so early in the series that we just don't have enough information yet to put all the pieces together. But hopefully I've opened your mind up to some possibilities and some possible explanations for what's really going on. I have more 1899 content on the way, including a full review of Season 1 if you're curious to hear my opinions on it rather than just my theories. So make sure you like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more. With that, thank you for watching and see you on the next One Take.